Morning, guys. So today we're going to talk about Persia, Alexander, and Hellenism. We're going to speed through this just a little bit um, because the activity that I want you guys to do on Canvas is pretty straightforward and is going to require a little bit more um, reading and some time to come up with a good answer to the question. So let's just go ahead and get started. So we haven't really talked about the Persian Empire. The Persians are kind of just there. They are all of this. Let me actually see if I can get this cursor. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor moving or not. Um, but they are pretty much taking over all of what would be modern day Iran, into parts of modern day Turkey, into Egypt, a little bit of Saudi Arabia, a little bit along the Persian Gulf into Saudi Arabia, but that's predominantly where the Persian Empire is established. One of the most interesting things about the Persian Empire, here we go. Let's see if I can do this real quick with my little laser pointer. We've got the Persians really creating these royal roads. You see this here in red, going from Susa all the way to Sardis. The former Assyrians, if you guys remember, the Assyrians were really settled along the Tigris and the Euphrates, along into the Nile River Valley. But now we've got the Persian Empire. And the Persian Empire really is established courtesy of an emperor called Cyrus the Great. And then Darius does a little more extension, Cambyses does some, but that's where we are currently talking about the Persians. The Persians are existing alongside India, so the Gupta and the Maurya are starting to form. They haven't formed just yet because they're slightly before that time, but they're really forming about the same time as the Qin and the early warring states within China. So, the Persian legacy, that's all we're going to really talk about. You don't need to know much else about the Persian Empire, except that there's two important kings, Cyrus and Darius. Both of them are the ones that expanded the empire to their peak. They are the ones that built the royal roads. So the royal roads within the Persian Empire are like the Silk Road. They're there to help trade, they're there to help commerce, they're there to help the spread of religion. They're there for the king to travel on, to visit his subjects. They also had a religion called Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is the first real monotheistic religion outside of Judaism to form within the Middle East. And their idea with Zoroastrianism is that there is this constant battle between the good and the bad spirits. So very, very similar to kind of what we see modern Christianity take on, where we'll ultimately have this final battle between good and evil. Zoroastrianism has that, building off of some of those ancient religions of Babylon that we talked about. So that's the Persian legacy. So we move to the west, to the Kingdom of Macedonia, in Greece, just north of Greece, and a man named Philip takes charge. He took charge. He dreamt of taking over Persia and eventually the Greeks, and we'll talk about the Greeks on Tuesday. And he succeeded in taking over Greece after the Peloponnesian War. So after the Peloponnesian War, and we have the great battles between the city-states, Macedonia is able to take over a weakened Greece. Well, then his son comes along. Alexander the Great was 20 years old when he became king. His father was stabbed to death at his wedding, and the 20-year-old took power. He liberated Egypt from the Persians. He took over Persia, and then eventually he took over India. But like I said yesterday, he left India real quick. He hopped on his elephants and said, "Peace, I don't need India, goodbye." India's doing its own thing now. But Persia and Egypt become under his control. So if you look at this map, Alexander conquered a lot. So don't pay attention to like those different kingdom names. They're not important. What I want you to focus on is this: his entire empire. This white line. That's his. He's essentially taken over all of that. He's had the largest empire in history. And even though those regions might not be shaded in the northern parts, he did extend into part of the Caucasus and into parts near the Caspian Sea. He had one of the largest empires. He incorporated the Silk Road and the royal roads. That's how he was able to travel from Babylon to Persepolis, up to Basra or Bactra, Bukhara. So he was able to do a lot of that. So eventually, Alexander dies 12 years later at the age of 32. He got a fever and died from it. They don't know what caused it, whether it was a poison in his drink. But then the empire was divided up into three. Antigonus took over Macedonia and Greece. Ptolemy took over Egypt. And Seleucus took over the Persian Empire. So he divided it up among three of his most trusted advisors. And that's what happened. That's what we're left with of the aftermath of Alexander the Great. These three individual rulers take over. Some are successful, most are not. But no one ever could match Alexander the Great's prowess at military combat. But Alexander was also famous for this idea of Hellenism. Hellenism is just blending of all the cultures in the empire. When your empire is that large, right? The people in Greece and the people of Macedonia are very, 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 very different than the people of Persia or the people of India. But Hellenism was this idea that we can blend all of these cultures together. So just think about it. Are we really blending all of these cultures together and really thinking that it's just existing in classical Greece, which we're going to talk about on Tuesday? The answer is no, right? We see Hellenism happening all over the world. Right here in America, we have a blending of all sorts of cultures. You go anywhere in this county and you can tell the difference. They're blending in. You go up to New York City, Washington, D.C., Dallas, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, St. Louis, Missouri, Kansas City. You see all of these cities blending these various cultures together. So, one of the most important cities that expanded Hellenism and really blended together was one of the many Alexandrias, this one in Egypt, along the banks of the Nile River. It was a port city. It was huge on trade. That's how Egypt was able to trade with Greece and with parts of what are modern-day Turkey. They were really known for their ethno-linguistic diversity. Okay, that's a big word. Let's break it down. Ethno, just referring to your ethnicity, and linguistic, just on how you talk. So there were a lot of languages being spoken in Alexandria by a lot of different people. And it's courtesy of Alexandria that we see a real true spread of that Greek polytheism, right? People are learning more about Zeus and Athena and Poseidon and Ares and Hermes. So this spread of Greek polytheism is heading into Egypt and into parts of the Middle East. Courtesy of Alexander's empire, we see a huge reinvestment in science and technology. We have huge advances in astronomy. We're able to guess the size of the Earth and the sun and calculate those distances. We have these brilliant mathematicians, Euclid and Pythagoras. You guys all know the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Archimedes discovers pi, 3.14159. So we're getting all of these things happening around the same time, right? So all of these huge inventions and innovations within science and understanding mathematics, they're important. And then finally, we've got some new philosophies emerging thanks to Hellenism. One of them is called Stoicism. It's really about focusing what you can control. You can't control everything. Believe me, there are many things I wish I could control, but I can't. And then this idea comes from a philosopher by the name of Epicurus, where he argues that the gods don't have interest. They're just there. The gods aren't really getting involved in our lives. It's up to us and our senses, not out senses. Our senses dictate everything. What we can see, what we can feel, what we can smell, what we hear, what we taste. Those senses are really dictating our lives, not the gods. The gods are chilling up in Mount Olympus or wherever they are. So those are the new philosophies that are emerging from this time period. All right, let me see if I can pull up the canvas site. I probably can't. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you your assignment. It's called Was Alexander Really Great? And what you're going to do is read a textbook chapter and watch a short YouTube video, and you're going to answer the question, was Alexander really great? I'm not going to tell you the answer. I'm going to let you decide for yourself based off of all of his accomplishments. That's all you have to do for today, and I hope you have a nice, long Labor Day weekend. There is no work on Monday. Do not expect an email from me on Monday. Don't do work over the weekend. Relax and enjoy. Have a nice one.